The world's oceans are so underexplored that if you dive deeper than 3,500 meters, there's a good chance to discover a new species unknown to science. There's also a good chance you'll find debris and garbage. Oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. The average depth of the oceans is about 3.7 kilometers. And since light can only penetrate to a depth of 100 meters, darkness reigns deep underwater. Let's push this statement one step further and conclude that since most of the planet is covered by water, it means that most of the Earth exists in total darkness. Water in the oceans account for almost 96% of the Earth's water. The portion of fresh water compared to seawater is so small that if the fresh water that flows into the ocean is spread over the surface of the ocean, it would have been about 1.25 meters thick. 94% of all life on Earth lives in water. It means that all of us who live on land belong to a very, very small minority. So what mysteries lurk in the depths of the oceans? The deeper we go, the more curious it gets. It seems that we know more about the surface of Mars than about the ocean floor of our planet. What's going on in the deepest places? We didn't know at all, at least until recently. Lack of light and extreme pressure makes this part of the ocean difficult to explore. Today, we're going on a journey into the very depths. We're going to find out what the bottom of the ocean looks like, what it consists of, and what happens there. Who knows what we will find there? We are going to dive deep to the places with most alien conditions. What was found in the deepest places of the ocean? So, our imaginable submersible sets off. We will make short stops at important marks until we get to the bottom. 40 meters. It is the maximum depth for pearl collectors diving without any scuba diving equipment. They do it by holding their breath. Below that mark, the increasing pressure of the water forces air to escape the lungs. That is why it is the maximum depth for recreational divers. 200 meters. 90% of all aquatic life exists in the layer of the world's oceans to a depth of 200 meters, because light still somehow manages to penetrate through the water. It creates the conditions for phytoplankton to grow. Its vast biomass feeds small crustaceans. In turn, those are food for fish and large mammals like whales. As we dive deeper, there's less light and less life. We enter the twilight zone. 332 meters. It is the record for deep diving with the scuba diver equipment. No one was able to dive deeper without a bathyscaphe. 565 meters. It is the maximum recorded diving depth of the emperor penguin. Photosynthesis is almost non-existent here. Not enough light. Therefore, there is no vegetation. However, we can find a relatively large number of fish, but for most of them, it is no longer the most friendly environment. They do not look here for good life. They go deeper in an attempt to hide from predators. 1,000 meters. It is the end of the twilight zone. There is less than 1% of the sunlight, but the inhabitants learned to emit their own light. They use bioluminescent chemical reactions to attract prey or deter predators. Up to a depth of 1,000 meters, there are siphonophores. They are the closest relatives of jellyfish. They live in colonies, clustered around a long tube. It serves as their common digestive system. As we go deeper, life forms become more bizarre and alien. 1,027 meters. It is a record of a military submarine dive. As we continue the dive, we enter a midnight zone where total darkness reigns. Food is extremely scarce, and ocean life is forced to conserve energy. Most animals do not hunt actively, but drift and collect sea snow, microparticles of dead fish remains, plant, feces, dust, and sand. 2,200 meters. It is the depth to which giant octopuses and even more giant sperm whales dive. Sometimes they even fight deadly battles at the depth. We can also find the anglerfish with a luminescent fin ray to lure other fish. For its prey, a glowing bait looks like a juicy food. In fact, the luminescence comes from symbiotic bacteria. 6,100 meters. It is the depth at which transcontinental internet cables are laid on the ocean floor. More than 90% of ocean is about 6,000 meters deep. It is considered the conditional bottom of the ocean. However, there are many places where the ocean sinks below its own floor, much deeper. We're talking about the famous ocean places. Let us visit the deepest and most famous one. The Mariana Trench is on the border of two lithospheric plates. It was formed due to subduction, submergence of one plate under the other. The Pacific Plate under the Philippine Plate. It was formed in its present form relatively recently, about 180 million years ago. At that time, the first mammals already existed on land. Contrary to misconceptions, the Mariana Trench is not a hole in the seabed, but a huge formation, 2,542 kilometers, more than 5 times the length of the famous Grand Canyon in the United States. It is also relatively narrow, averaging about 70 kilometers. With such dimensions, it is not surprising that there are several deepest places, more than 10,000 meters deep. The Challenger Abyss is the most famous. It is located in the southwestern part of the trench, 340 kilometers from the island of Guam. According to various data, its maximum depth ranges from 10,028 meters to 11,034 meters below sea level. The second deepest place in the ocean is also in the Mariana Trench. This is the Siren Abyss, 200 kilometers east of the Challenger Abyss. Its maximum depth is slightly less, 10,809 meters. Interestingly, the deepest place is not the nearest place to the center of the Earth. Our planet is not perfectly spherical, but slightly flattened at the poles. Because the planet bulges along the equator, the radius at the poles is about 25 kilometers less than the radius at the equator. Therefore, the Arctic Ocean seafloor is closer to the center of the Earth than the bottom of the Challenger Abyss. Because of its enormous scale, the Mariana Trench has a special environment with some dramatic variations in conditions. For example, at its very top, at a depth of only 414 meters, there is the Daikoku volcano. You can observe a rare phenomenon, a lake of pure molten sulfur underwater. The black substance boils at a temperature of 187 degrees Celsius. There is an even more amazing place. It is called Black Smokers. These are hydrothermal springs at a depth of about 1,600 meters, which shoot out highly mineralized water under pressure of hundreds of atmospheres, with a temperature of up to 450 degrees Celsius. According to the hypothesis, 1 billion years ago, the Black Smokers became the cradle of life in the ocean. As for the existence of life in the Mariana Trench, for a long time, scientists believed that it is possible only at relatively shallow depths. The high pressure at the very bottom of the Challenger Abyss and the temperature of about 1 degree were considered hostile conditions for any life. However, the first manned expeditions proved otherwise. 2 Americans, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh, were the first people to visit the Challenger Abyss in 1960. They descended to 10,918 meters in 5 hours on the deep-diving research bathyscaphe Trieste. At this mark, the explorers spent 20 minutes and saw almost nothing because of the clouds of silt raised by the apparatus. However, they spotted a flat fish in the beam of the searchlight. It was a scientific sensation that they found signs of life at such depth. However, the mere spotting of fish was inconclusive, and the scientific community braced itself for years of waiting for the next expeditions. The wait till March 24th, 1995. On that day, a Japanese probe Kaiko was lowered to the maximum depth of the depression and recorded a level of 10,911.4 meters. It also brought back samples of silt, where scientists discovered microscopic living creatures. Foraminifera are single-celled organisms with a mineral skeleton. In July 2011, another research expedition used special models, drop cams equipped with digital video cameras and powerful flashlights, to explore the deepest places of the ocean. The most impressive find was a gigantic foraminifera. It was huge for single-celled organisms, over 10 centimeters in size. The next expedition was taken in 2012 by Hollywood filmmaker James Cameron on the one-person human-occupied vehicle Deep Sea Challenger. Later, scientists found about 200 species of invertebrates in soil samples brought back. Finally, in December 2014, another expedition reached a depth of 8,145 meters and found complex multicellular organisms. Scientists found previously unknown fish, which looked like snailfish. The fish is considered the record holder for deep water. There are no other fish there except snailfish. The good news is that that species has no natural enemies at this depth. Now, let's go almost to the opposite side of the globe to look into another interesting oceanic depression. The Puerto Rican Trench is located on the boundary between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean on the site of a geological pit. It is the deepest depression in the Atlantic. Its lowest point is at 8,376 meters. It is called the Milwaukee Depth, in honor of the U.S. Navy ship Milwaukee, the ship that first found it. The notorious geographical discovery was made on February 14, 1939, but the exact depth was not measured until 2018. It was found by state-of-the-art equipment, the Kongsberg EMT24 multibeam sonar. Later, a retired U.S. Navy officer turned private equity investor Victor Vescovo completed a first manned dive on the roster into the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point at the Atlantic Ocean, on December 19, 2018. Like many other deep places in the ocean, it is a very turbulent place geologically. Seismic activity has already had catastrophic consequences for the neighboring islands, especially the island of Puerto Rico. On October 11, 1918, due to a 7-point earthquake, a tsunami wave struck the west coast of the island. More than 100 people were killed, and the damage amounted to tens of millions of dollars. Some geoscientists believe in the possibility of a powerful volcanic eruption in the near future, which in turn will cause a disaster. There is a geological anomaly associated with the Puerto Rican Trench. According to NASA, there is a super dense geological formation under the trench. It is so dense that it has an increased gravitational impact on the ocean's surface, causing it to subside slightly. It explains a negative impact on the accuracy of navigation devices. The fauna of the trough is fascinating. In 2012, a robotic bathyscaphe descended to the bottom of the trough and photographed a swarm of amphipods, small crustaceans. They were caught and brought to the surface for analysis. The same expedition video recorded invertebrate creatures, which in no way should be here. Later, Dr. Stace Beaulieu of the Woods Hole Oceanic Institution identified one by its soft, dark carcass length of 10 to 20 centimeters. It turned out to be a sea cucumber of the genus Peniagon. He also recognized a representative of the crustacean family, Monopsidae, in another creature. The fact of their existence at such extreme depths forced scientists to make serious adjustments to the theories about the survival of species. Now, let's look into the Kermadec Trench in the Pacific Ocean. It is as gigantic a deep-water trough in the Pacific as the Mariana Trench in the Atlantic. It is located at the eastern foot of the Kermadec Islands and connects to the Tonga Trench in the north. Its length is about 1,200 kilometers. It was discovered in 1889 by an expedition of the British ship Penguin. The depth is also only slightly less than the Mariana Trench, 10,047 meters. The trench is interesting with its specific animal species discovered by research expeditions. For example, in 2012, the amphipods Alicella gigantea were found at the bottom of the depression. Their size puzzled and confounded scientists. They were up to 34 centimeters long, while most of the crustaceans found elsewhere are much smaller, about 2 centimeters long. The gigantic size is a paradox resulting from extreme living conditions at great depths. Deep-sea fish of the Liparian family were also found in the trench. To be more precise, it is a special biological species, Notoloparus kermadescensis. It is the second deepest fish with a very narrow range of depths, from 6,472 to 7,561 meters. The discovery of the pearlfish in the Kermadec Trench caused a sensation. It was found at a depth of 8,200 to 8,300 meters. It was an unusual find because the pearlfish live much closer to the surface, at 1,800 to 2,000 meters deep. How these creatures got to extreme depths and survived remains to be explained. Our story covered only a few pages from the book in exploring the deepest ocean places. As technological capabilities develop, more and more dives take place. In 2020, as many as 6 manned expeditions took place to the Mariana Trench. So we can hope and wait for more amazing discoveries.